What are some of the best games you might have missed in 2019?
Hot take.
I definitely played them. There's so many games. It's crazy, folks. 2019 has been one jam-packed year. Seemingly every single week we get a whole bunch of indie games being thrown at us, and it's hard to kind of pick through all of them and play through every single one, but we tried to.
And we don't have a lot of time, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't play them.
Yeah, a lot of the games that I played on the list, I at least gave an hour or two to, in some cases more than that. There are so many games that have been released. Like I said, I think I've played at least 200 or 300 games this year, indie games that have been released. And this isn't a list for indie games specifically, just games you might have missed in general, because believe it or not, folks, there are games that have gone under the wave as the larger titles like Resident Evil 2 came out and everyone was talking about those. And
indie games just happen to fill this list more because they don't have the same kind of marketing power behind them that the AAA publishers have and push towards their games. So you hear about those big games like Resident Evil, like you mentioned, but you don't hear about the more indie titles, so they just happen to be here.
Yes, yeah. Now, these are titles you can probably play on a bunch of different platforms. I think, believe it or not, most of these games are available on the Switch. That isn't to say we're only picking Switch games. It's just there's a lot of indie games on Switch. Yeah,
the way it went.
Just a bit too much. But let's begin the list with one game I think is really cool, Katana Zero. Now, if you're a fan of Hotline Miami, Katana Zero is basically the same concept and philosophy. You go into a room, clear out everybody, go to the next room, and it has this kind of really cool, weird background story that gets pieced together as you play the game, as most of these indie games tend to go with their narratives. There's no voice acting. It doesn't need it. There's a fantastic soundtrack. That was needed. The way the gameplay works is very cool. Basically, you're this character who's an assassin. He goes to certain locations to get rid of one specific target, but the rule is you have to get rid of all of the targets. You have to get rid of all the people in that space before you get to the target and not be seen. So how this plays out is the character is listening to music, and as he's planning what he's doing, you're playing through that planning sequence. And then if you fail that planning sequence, it rewinds all the way to the beginning and goes, no, that doesn't work. Let's try it again. And when you actually see the sequence planned out and worked properly, you see a security footage camera of actually your proper sequence going through. It's really, really cool. You see it in real time being played back, and it makes your every single move look like an action movie. It's a really cool game that I think kind of learns a lot from Hotline Miami, but also improves upon it as well.
Speaking of music, though, my first entry is Cadence of Hyrule. Now, Cadence of Hyrule was made by the same guys that did Crypt of the Necrodancer, and if you play the games, it feels pretty much like Crypt of the Necrodancer, but Zelda.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing. So what they've ended up adding is that they kept a lot of the main core mechanics of Crypt of the Necrodancer. There's still very nice music interlaced in the game, and everything runs on the beats. So you move, characters move, enemies move, there are patterns, but because it's also now sort of a Zelda game, there are a lot of puzzles that they got added in. So it feels, especially with the art style being as pixelated as it is, it feels like, hey, here's an SNES, like Link to the Past kind of Zelda game, but a lot better animated because now it's in 2019. There's music going. You gotta just go and kill things and do puzzles, and I really enjoyed how everything came together.
I gotta be honest, this is probably gonna be the last time we ever see a Zelda game being pixelated. That's officially like released directly for a pixel-based game.
They might go back to it eventually.
Yeah, it was nice to see. You're right. It does look like a Super Nintendo game. Maybe something Super Nintendo Plus, like it has some extra visual effects to it. But honestly, it's one of those things. If you don't like beat sequencing games where you have to do things to the beat, you're not going to like this game. But if you do like Crypt of the Necrodancer, I mean, it's Crypt of the Necrodancer with Zelda. That's it. That's really it, and that's fantastic.
And I never even beat Necrodancer, but I just enjoyed the early levels, even though it got like hard enough for me. But Cadence of Hyrule wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Speaking of pixelated games, this next one is really near and dear to my heart. I'm a big fan of River City Ransom. It's just one of those old games that I've always felt was really fun to play. And I never thought we'd ever see a real sequel in terms of like an upgraded version that wasn't a remake of the original, but more or less a spiritual successor, which is still more or less a sequel. River City Girls. It's really strange because this is a sequel, but it also is a new story. So it's not like a remake of the original, which is what I was expecting to see at some point.
Yeah.
What you get here is the storyline taken from the perspective of the girlfriends of the main characters from the first game.
The ones that got kidnapped.
Yeah, and this time they're kidnapped, and now the girls who are in high school are angry about this, and they just go through a beat-up rampage to find out who's responsible. Wonderful animated intro cutscene, wonderful manga-type like cutscenes in between with great voice acting, and it's not just still-framed manga things, it's actually like they're slightly animated themselves with just some stuff. It has a really solid look. Lots of detail and effort's been put into this. When you actually go to play the game itself, it's all pixelated, so it looks like like I said, a SNES Plus type game. This is more something that looks almost like it could have been achievable on the Sega Saturn. That if the Sega Saturn can go in high definition and widescreen, that's what you'd see here. It's got really simple gameplay, but it's fun. You've got all those kind of things that you've seen in the original River City Ransom, but now it's just kind of expanded upon, built upon, and honestly, it's just a really good game that I have a fear a lot of people missed out on.
Another game that I really liked that freaking nobody I know has been talking about is the Somnium Files. Now,
Yeah,
the Somnium
I don't know this one, folks.
The Somnium Files, it was developed by the same guy that did the Zero Escape trilogy.
Yep.
Difference is that he has learned where he has made mistakes, because the third entry in the Zero Escape trilogy, not great.
Okay.
Not great. Like, the story is there, but the presentation is just all over the place, because in previous entries, it was a lot more visual novel based. There were 3D models, yes, but they kind of just had like portraits and they moved and interacted with the text. The third game, it was like, no, we're going to go like all cinematic, and it didn't work because they didn't necessarily have mastery over 3D models moving in 3D space. So it was really janky, ruined a lot of the experience. But by the time the Somnium Files came around, they knew what they were doing, and it shows greatly because it's a much more polished adventure experience. They've finally been able to move from just taking the narratives in the visual novel space that they had it and moving it into a more 3D cinematic space. So the game itself is this narrative-driven puzzle-solving experience, and it is like one of my favorite sci-fi things like of all year. Like, not just in games either. This is one of my favorite sci-fi things of all year.
So would you say, if you're like a big fan of the Zero Escape games, this is like the next way to go with that?
Sort of. It doesn't have anywhere near the same amount of difficulty that the Zero Escape games were. The Zero Escape games sometimes had puzzles that were obtuse for the sake of being obtuse. It was
logic.
It was very, very missed in that respect. So this is a lot more of a more open experience for people. It's not extremely difficult, but it is still challenging enough that you feel satisfied when you get to the end of it.
Okay, that's cool. Well, the last game, I think a couple people have played, but I don't think enough people have played it. Baba Is You. This, speaking about puzzle games, is a puzzle game that I've never seen before. So what it basically is, it's a game engine, and as you're playing, you have to like collect a flag, or you have to do something to win. Typically at the very beginning, it's your Baba, this little character, and you move your character one space at a time, and you move towards a flag, and if you get the flag, you win. That's the game. The thing is, on the screen somewhere, there will be words, and it will say, Baba is you, flag is win. And basically, you can bump those words out of the way and reorganize them so that Baba is win and flag is you. And that way, you're the flag and you have to hit Baba. It gets really strange when you see a wall and the wall is separating you from the flag. And you can't get past the wall because the wall is stop. But if you move stop out of the way, then wall is nothing and the wall actually doesn't have a function, so you can walk right through the wall. It's very bizarre, but if you're seeing the trailer right now and the footage, this should make a lot more sense when you see it in play. You saw a little bit of this.
Yes, I did. Oh, God,
yeah.
yeah. No, I need to grab this for the Switch now.
Yeah. I mean,
Is it on the Switch?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. It's one of those games where I think a lot of people that see it probably think it's just going to be very basic, but as the game progresses, it gets more interesting and more complex and more diverse. I was not expecting this game at all because essentially it's a rule set game. It's a game where you alter the rules to achieve your goal. And I love puzzles like that because they prevent you from thinking in very simple ways, that you have to think complex and more difficult as you go along. You can go through the game in more of an easier mode. And like all good puzzle games, the more you play, the more difficult it gets. They introduce new concepts and ideas as you get further along. And there's just a lot to see. The visuals are super basic. It honestly looks like a Commodore 64 game. For many people, that would be cool. Or maybe an NES style game, to be fair. It's a nice looking game, I think. It gets right to the point. You're not going to have crazy visuals that mess you up while you're playing. It's all about those rules that you place and change. And honestly, if you haven't played it, you really should give it a shot, especially if you're a fan of puzzle games. So that's pretty much our 2019.
A lot of pixelated games.
Yeah, a lot of. I mean, but that's true. When it comes to indie games, when it comes to games that kind of go under the radar, usually they don't have the biggest budgets. And, 3D models and that kind of stuff, 3D engines tend to cost a lot more than basic 2D animated games and stuff like that. Of all the games we've talked about, I think River City Girls might be the most high budget, I believe. Would you say Somnium Files is probably
more? Probably more, because that one is full 3D models. It is full 3D experience.
Yeah, so it's got a bit of a different flow. But folks, were there any games that we didn't mention that you think should be on this list? Let us know what you think in the comments below.